Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. I'm your host, Candace, and today we're doing another book review. I know it's been a minute since I did a book review, so I wanted to talk today about one that I read actually probably over 6 months to a year ago, possibly. It's been out for a while. It's not a new release. It was really, really impactful for me. It's called I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. So I don't have the book here with me. I actually purchased it on Audible and listened to it that way. I personally really like when people are doing biographies, if the author is reading it, or any book that the author has written where they read it themselves, just because there's a lot of emotion and a lot of things you can feel through the author reading it themselves, where they're kind of processing it as they're speaking it into the microphone. So I felt like it was really impactful to listen to her read the book as well. But if you don't have Audible, I will link the way to get the book online in the show notes. But yeah, that's what we're going to jump into today. So Jennette McCurdy, if anyone's not familiar with her, she was a child actor. She's famous for her roles on iCarly and another spinoff show called Sam and Cat. And so she's now, a grown adult, and she is an author. She actually, if you listen to the book, and I'm hoping that you will, or you read it, she talks about how so much of her identity, especially as a celebrity, is in these TV shows that she was on as a child. And I'm assuming that this is not uncommon for most child actors, is that once they're adults, they don't want to be known as that kid from, Full House or whatever, right? Like, I'm sure that there becomes a time in their career where they want to feel like, I'm not just a child actor on a funny kids show. I have more potential or more talent than this. So she talks about that a lot in the book, how she wants to be an author. She likes to write. She may want to produce. If you try to find her online, she's pretty not present online. She had a podcast for a little while. It was very brief, so you can go and listen to her podcast, and I'll link that as well if you kind of want to follow up and listen to her talk. But to get to the point of why I really like this book. So the title is a little bit like jarring. I'm glad my mom died. Most people will be like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, why would you say that? But as she talks about her childhood and her upbringing, I really, really resonated with a lot of the stuff she had to share about her own trauma and how she processed it, and she's working to heal it in her life right now. So she was raised Mormon, not like severe Mormon where they're wearing like long skirts and long hair, polyamory or polygamy or whatever you want to call that. It wasn't that, but it was in the LDS. And her mom homeschooled her. And from the very beginning of the book, you can see that her mom is trying to fulfill her own dreams through her daughter. She has 2 sons and 1 daughter, Jenette. And so Jenette talks about how her mom puts her in acting at a very, very young age. And her mom puts a lot of pressure on her to perform. Jenette is naturally really gifted at acting, and she takes direction well. She has a really good memory for her lines. And so she's just really good at it. And so even though there becomes a point in her career, I would say she's still a minor child, that she doesn't really want to be an actor anymore. She doesn't really have a choice because her family is now dependent on her income. Her mom is her manager and agent, which is a common trope you hear in the industry, is that the parent, I know Macaulay Culkin's family went through this where he had to I think he got, what is that word that I'm looking for, where you become an adult when you're a minor. I'll think of the word in 5 minutes when I don't need it anymore. But anyway, I've heard this is pretty common. So although her mom was forced by law to put money into an account for her when she was an adult, the rest of the money was spent on paying bills and paying for rent and paying for car payments and things like that. So she talks about there's so much pressure on her as a minor child to support her entire family. And also the emotional and psychological pressure her mom is putting on her to be a star and fulfill her mom's hopes and dreams through her life. So even though you, as the listener, may not be like, being like, well, I'm not an actor, I'm not in the industry, I'm not an entertainer, you could probably see a lot of similarities, especially for those with complex PTSD. Most of us got here because of our childhood. Some people get complex PTSD through other methods, but this book really focuses on what it's like to develop trauma in childhood from the dynamics happening in your family of origin, the family that raised you, your home environment. So she's talking about the dysfunction that's happening between her parents' relationships and between her and her mom and her parentification and inappropriate boundaries. I don't want to give the whole book away because I really want you to read it, but I really, really felt seen through her own experiences because I too was homeschooled. I too grew up in a really religious environment where there was a lot of shame around sexuality and women needing to be small and seen and pretty and conform. I also really resonated with the fact that her mom was so enmeshed in her and her dad was pretty much checked out emotionally, and he was physically present some of the time, but basically that was it. And I was like, okay, I feel seen in this. I feel like this person had a very similar experience to me in my own childhood. Even though I'm much older than her, the experience was eerily similar. So she talks about how, her mom had her own mental health issues. I would assume her mom had some kind of cluster B personality disorder from what she describes, but her mom had cancer throughout her whole childhood off and on. She would get treatment and go into remission and be fine for a while, and then the cancer would come back. So this other layer happening of parentification, of emotional entanglement with her mother, where she had to support her mom and be there for her because her mom could die at any moment, right? And her mom really did put that over her kids' heads and her spouse head and the other family members, like, oh my God, you need to do what I want because I couldn't be here tomorrow. And it was a guilt mechanism, which again, even if you as the listener don't have a parent who had a severe medical issue that could cause them to die, you probably had a relationship with a parent or a caregiver where they were guilting you and trying to make you feel something so that you would do what they wanted. It was a mechanism of them using something to control you, feel bad, feel like you need to submit to my will, feel like you need to do what I'm asking you, because if you don't, then you're going to hurt me. And so I really saw that her mom's behaviors and, way of parenting, if you wanted to call it that, were, pretty pervasive and what a lot of people who have complex PTSD that come from childhood would experience. And so as she's coming into adulthood and she's trying to strike out on her own, you see the common thing, which, I was in, and I think I technically still am in, a Facebook group called Adult Daughters of Narcissistic and Borderline Parents or something like that. And when I was heavily involved in the group many years ago, you would see this as a common theme, is that when you become an adult or, try to strike out on your own and have any sort of independence, you want to get a driver's license, you want to get a job, you want to move out, the parent suddenly amps it up. Like, how dare you leave me? And you can't do this. And you're abandoning the family. And it's just another way that the parent is relying on that child, which is now an adult person, to meet their needs, to kind of stay in the spot that they've created for them, this avatar that the parent has formed and molded, and you're trying to break out and go be your own person and have a life of your own, the parent suddenly is like, no, 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 I've worked so hard to make you this way. Don't mess it up. Don't leave. Don't shake it. Don't rock the boat, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure a lot of people who have complex PTSD and parenting, dynamics with their parents where it wasn't all roses will identify with this theme that she talks about. She's trying to become independent. She's trying to build her own life. She's trying to buy a place to, a condo or a house or something. And there's all these dynamics from these family members. I also really loved, which, I mean, love is a weird word to describe this, but resonated with, I guess is a better word. She talks about her grandmother, and her grandmother, which is her mom's mother in this scenario. The behaviors you can see from the grandmother trickling down through the mom into her. So we're talking about 3 generations now of this, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, whatever you want to term it, dysfunction for sure at the minimum, where now grandma is guilting and, saying things and getting involved and causing a fuss and stirring the pot. Triangulation is another big theme you see in the book, where when the mom and the grandma cannot get their way, they go to other members of the family to try to reinforce the control. In some of the narcissistic groups, they call these people flying monkeys, which I don't love that term, because generally speaking, the people that are being triangulated in this, number one, don't realize that this is what's happening, that the narcissist or the borderline or the person with the control issues is using other family members to try to regain the power dynamic that's been at play. Usually they're like, well, mom's just really sad and she doesn't understand why you won't talk to her anymore. And they're just trying to keep the peace, really, at the end of the day. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's perfect and that some of these people don't have ill intentions or their own issues coming into play, but I don't love the term flying monkeys. So anyway, the triangulation aspect in this book, where the grandma and the mom are using the brothers or the uncles or the dads, it was like, oh yeah, I feel like that too. I've had that happen too. So all throughout, as she progresses through her story, I'm like, I get it. I feel this. I've had this experience. But I think for her, what she's describing is this extra layer of like, I should feel bad that my mom might die at any time, but I kind of wish she would. Like, she gets to a point where she was like, let it end, let it be done. Like, this whole hanging cloud hanging over your head of this, something is going to happen. She's finally able to get to a place where she comes to peace with it. Her mom, spoiler alert, her mom does pass away, hence the title of the book. But she's able to, kind of deal with that in a way as it integrates. Initially, it's very disturbing for her that her mom has died, because she's still entangled in this relationship of like, I can't make my mom happy. I need to do what would please her. I need to keep the peace. I need to live up to her expectations of me, even after she's died, which again is a really good theme. If you've ever had somebody in your life pass away and you feel like you have unfinished business with that person, like, how do you resolve that dynamic of like, there are things I wanted to say to them, there are things I wish I could have done with them or stood up to them, or conversations and processed my emotions with them, and you just can't, because this person is no longer present on this plane. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying in those scenarios, you may feel like, I can't have that conversation with that person because they're not here anymore. I want them to hear me, and I can't get them to hear me because they're deceased, right? So I think that's something that's really valuable that's in this book, is figuring out like, this person who we had this really strained relationship with is no longer here. How do I heal? How do I heal when I can't go and tell them off, or I can't go like invite them to lunch and like be like, you hurt me, these are the things you did to bother me? There's so many of us who have trauma where we really cannot have those conversations with those people. Even if they are alive, if we were to have them, they're super unproductive usually, and they're very draining, and we don't usually get out of them this deep awakening and apology and the person taking responsibility for their part in the dynamic, right? So I thought that was really helpful to see how she navigated her mom's passing and learning how to heal when this person is still impacting her, even though they're not alive, right? So that was another aspect of the book that I really love. She also talks about having an eating disorder that her mom kind of built into her from her preteen years, which I don't have, knock on wood, thus far, I've not had like an eating disorder come up, but I know that's a lot of people who have complex trauma. That's another factor that they face, is it can play out in their relationship with food. So she talks a lot about that. So if that's something you've struggled with or are trying to process and heal from, you would probably find really valuable information in how she addresses it. She also talks about how she developed OCD in childhood and her little, people call them quirks or whatever, their behavior patterns, like, some people do counting, some people check locks and doors over and over again. She talks about hers and how those played out as a coping mechanism to manage her anxiety as a child actor and trying to live up to these standards her mom had for her, and how she works through them as an adult and tries to heal them and move forward from them. Her podcast does touch briefly on that too, the eating disorder and the OCD stuff, the anxiety. So if you're dealing with either one of those things, just the podcast alone, which is a free resource on the internet, you just Google Jennette McCurdy, and I'll put that, I said I'll put that in the link, but I will in the bottom of the show notes so you can find her podcast. But really, she had such a complex and varied experience that I feel like almost anybody could read this book if they've had trauma in any form and be like, oh my God, I get that. I've been there. I feel that. I understand what she's saying. And she talks about how it's going to be a lifelong process for her to figure out how to become her own person, how to live her life in a way that's what she actually wants, and to not be continuing to live in a way that's just to appease her mom or her parents or her grandma. And there's some other things she touches on there too. I don't want to spend an hour basically telling you the whole book so that you don't go read it, because I really think everyone who has complex PTSD would benefit from this book. It's one of my favorites. The fact that I'm able to do this review for you months and months, almost a year after I read the book, it really, really impacted me. I thought it was excellent. She is a fantastic writer, and I would not be surprised, and I hope for her that this book gets turned into a film or a mini series or something, because it is enthralling. Her writing is so evoking of emotion. She really lets you feel like what it's like to be in the scene. And I really hope for her that she gets more opportunities to write more books, because I would love to see what's coming for her. I liked the podcast. I wish it was longer, but I get that she has things going on in her life that she may not have time to do a podcast. But I really hope to see more from her, because I think she's very, very talented, and she has a really insightful viewpoint that she could bring to media, which we don't see a lot, is people overcoming all these things and being really vulnerable. There was a TV show recently that I thought did an excellent job of that, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. I might do a separate episode on it. But yeah, so anyway, I really loved the book. I will link the book for Audible and where to buy it in paperback. I'll link her podcast. I think she might have a website. I don't know, if you have an opportunity, you want to reach out to her for writing or acting or producing, excellent. I'll put all those things in the show notes. And I just hope that you guys have a great week. I know this is a shorter one, but it's easier for me to get these done quickly instead of the longer drawn out ones, a little bit more tiresome for me. So for right now, we're going to do little short, brief ones, and I will talk to you all in 2 weeks. Thanks so much for listening.